You're probably familiar with randomized Nuzlocks, where you randomize wild Pokemon and the Pokemon of enemy trainers to give your Nuzlocke a new sense of spontaneity and excitement. The downside is that since you don't know what to expect, especially from trainers or gym leaders, there's nothing really to plan for. The strategy component is something I've really come to enjoy with hardcore Nuzlocks, so I came up with the idea to randomize the wild Pokemon, but keep enemy trainers the same. Brand new encounters, same enemy teams to plan against. Since I have no idea what encounters to expect, this could end in a total catastrophe. In addition to my standard hardcore Nuzlocke rules, I'll also be banning the use of setup moves and any intentional EV training. If you enjoy hardcore Nuzlocke content like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I make these types of videos regularly, so it would mean a lot to see the support. But without further ado, let's get started. Our very first glimpse into this randomized Nuzlocke begins with our starter. I realize it sounds dumb that I said our journey begins with our starter, because what else do we begin with other than a starter, but it's just the way the line worked out, okay? I set these so that each of them would be a first stage Pokemon that would evolve twice, much like the regular starters. Our options here are Abra, Nidoran Male, and Aron. Abra I think would be a pain in the ass to grind up in the early game. Aron I actually really like, but I figure that it's already available to us pretty easily in the base game. But Nidoran Male is something you would never play with in a regular Emerald playthrough, so I went with him and named him Dig-Nikon. We're using anagrams for the nickname theme, and most encounters will be based on whatever is their final evolution, but with a few exceptions. Nidoran Male filled the Torchic slot, and since I didn't randomize the enemy trainers, this means May will have Mudkip and Marshtomp for the rest of the game. We take care of the most adorable amphibian in the world, and carry on with our first set of encounters. I set these randomizations, is that a word? To all be at similar strength, meaning for example that a Zigzagoon is much more likely to randomize into something like a Rattata or a Mareep, instead of something like a Dragonite. Our first encounter is in the form of Ego Yurt the Tyrogue on Route 101. On Route 103 we catch a Feebas of all things, and name him Cleotim. Route 102 we catch a Cascoon named Dos Tux, which is admittedly a typical Hoenn encounter. A Hoenn counter, if you will.
Okay, get out.
We're immediately able to evolve him, so he can reach his final form, Dos Tux the Dustox. And then on Route 104 we find a Togepi that we named Sitgot. And then through magic, we raise its friendship all the way so we can evolve it into Togetic. He has Hustle, but the rumors of Hustle being a terrible ability must be fiction, right? Surely it can't be all that bad and come back to punish me, right? In Petalburg Woods we find ourselves a Weedle which we name Breedel, evolve it into a Kakuna, and have a bit of a close call with the Aqua Grunt, but Breedel clutches up. We make it to Rustboro City, but before taking on Roxanne we have two more encounters to add to our crew. On Route 116 we find what is unironically one of the best encounters of this run, a Paris that we name Axpair. And then, in Rusturf Tunnel we catch what again is a typical Hoenn encounter. It's a Zigzagoon. We name it Eon Noli. Taking a look at our team, we don't exactly have the best lineup for Roxanne and her rock types. We don't have the usual Lombres, Nuzleafs, Merrills, or even Mudkip or Trico to help with this battle, making it an interesting first challenge in this half-randomized Nuzlocke. But after some planning, I think I've got a decent strategy. Roxanne of course leads with Geodude, and I lead with Dig-Nikon. Thankfully Dig-Nikon learns Double Kick, so we use that to bring Geodude to about half before she enacts the AI's obsession with speed lowering moves in the form of Rock Tomb. Despite this, we still outspeed the Geodude, and on the next turn we take it out with another Double Kick. She then sends out her second Geodude, and since we're at risk to a critical hit death, I switch over to Sitgot, which I know looks bizarre because of Sitgot being a flying type, but it's because of my flawless plan of using Charm. Except for the one flaw of Sitgot having Hustle. Yeah, Hustle is a terrible ability, I hate it. Geodude brings Sitgot low with another Rock Tomb, and I gotta switch out. I go over to Eon Noli to start using Growl for the much better accuracy, and I'm able to get off 4 Growls while the Geodude alternates between Defense Curls and Rock Tombs, with the Rock Tombs doing less and less damage each time, barring any crits. The reason I lowered this Geodude's attack so much is for my bug types to better withstand the super effective rock moves. I switch to Dos Tux as Geodude lands a non-crit Rock Tomb, and Dos Tux actually doesn't get his speed lowered thanks to the Shield Dust ability. We exchange between Confusions and Rock Tombs while getting Roxanne to waste her 2 potions, and luckily avoiding critical hits. So then, last up is Nosepass. I stay in with Dos Tux and start going for Confusions. The Nosepass interestingly just uses Harden for the first 2 turns. We bring Nosepass to over half before Nosepass uses Rock Tomb to bring us down to 2 HP. Thinking about the early game benefits of keeping Dustox on the team, I switch over to Eon Noli on a Rock Tomb. Even though Eon Noli's HP is low, in order to give my teammates a better chance at handling this Nosepass, I make the difficult decision to stay in and use Growl. And then Nosepass misses a Rock Tomb. Okay. I then go for a second Growl, but unfortunately Nosepass connects with the next Rock Tomb, resulting in the first death of the run. Thank you for your service, you beautiful raccoon dog. I then send in Axepear. Nosepass foolishly goes for Harden, because I taught Axepear the Bullet Seed TM. So I go for it, preparing myself for needing at least 2 Bullet Seeds to take out this Nosepass. Unless, on the 4th Bullet Seed, we get a critical hit, bringing a swift end to Nosepass and giving us our first gym badge. We head back to the Rusturf Tunnel to quash the Aquagrun's Poochyena, and then at level 16 we see our starter evolve into a Nidorino. Normally you can have the option to randomize items as well as Pokemon, but I decided not to do that in order to know exactly where items like the Moonstone will be. By the way, if you ever see an empty party slot, it's because I have a Pokemon there that's technically dead but that we're using as an HM Mon. Anyways, we then sail over to Dewford Town where our next challenge awaits, along with some new encounters. We pick up the Old Rod and start fishing. Our first one, starting in Dewford Town, is a Cacnea named CC Nature. Then, on Route 107, we find a Growlithe. Despite the fact that I had to swap out Axepear in the first turn because of Ember, and the fact that Growlithe has Roar, we very luckily catch it with a Great Ball, and name it Annie Sarah. Route 106, we quote-unquote fish up a Skiploom named Flufum PJ. Who let this guy do anything? Then in Granite Cave, we find a Rattata named Aritecta. Flufum PJ's flying type actually helps quite a bit with getting through the trainers in Dewford Gym, and before we know it, we next take on Brawly. Despite being adamant-natured, Dustox is able to do a little over half health with Confusion on Brawly's Machop before he wastes a Bulk Up. On the next turn, we successfully take it out with another Confusion. Next he brings out Meditite. His only attacking move is Focus Punch, so as long as we keep attacking, he won't be able to deal any damage. A Gust deals a non-insignificant amount of damage before he just uses Bulk Up. Another Gust takes it out despite the defense boost, which means we're at full health when his last Pokemon, Makuhita, takes the stage. We use Confusion for a good chunk of damage before Makuhita retaliates with a Vital Throw for a not so good chunk of damage. We then bring Makuhita into the red with another Confusion, plus we get the lucky Confusion. Makuhita attempts to make a move, but he hits himself in Confusion, taking himself out and winning us the battle. As a reward for defeating the Fighting-type gym, our singular Fighting-type party member Ego Yurt evolves into a Hitmonchan. From here on out, I won't mention any of the not-so-crucial encounters, since there are a lot of encounters in general. We sail over to Slateport City, and the encounter on Route 109, just beneath Slateport, happens to be on the more crucial side, Magikarp. I didn't officially ban Gyarados for this Nuzlocke, and I actually don't end up using this for most of the playthrough, but I do use it for one important battle coming up, which you'll see in a bit. We name him Argos Day. On Route 110 we find ourselves a weak, boring little... a Beldum. Alright. Making it my life's mission to catch this thing, I paralyze it and start throwing ball after ball after ball at it, but the Beldum keeps whittling itself down further with its own takedowns. I keep trying, desperately hoping every time that it'll just stay in the ball, but unfortunately it takes itself out before we can catch it, losing our encounter for the route. Turns out that Beldum basically has like a 1% catch rate, so ultimately I can't be too surprised, but it's still really dumb. We clear out the Aquagrunts in the Slateport Museum while acquiring the Thief TM, and then we continue our way up to Route 110 where we take on May. Thankfully there were no major difficulties, so we can pretty much skip this. Of course Axepear is the one to deal the final blow in this battle. We make it to Mauville City, and then to the east of Mauville City on Route 118 we find another crucial encounter, a Wooper. We catch it and name it Quagrise. On Route 117 we catch a Ralts and name it Dear Virgo. Oh, and it's modest, so that's pretty cool. Somehow, against all odds, we defeated Wally, and then in preparation for Watson, we get some helpful evolutions to buff our team. Despite having a Quagsire, I've gone into the Watson battle with a ground type before and wiped. That doesn't mean it can't happen again. Let's see what our ragtag team can do. One of the very many helpful things about Quagrise is that he has the damp ability. meaning that Watson's leading Voltorb can't blow up on us. His Voltorb whiffs a rollout, giving us a clean KO with Mudshot. Electrike uses Howl, clean KO with Mudshot. Magneton thankfully goes for Sonic Boom instead of Supersonic, so we take the KO with a Mudshot. But now comes out his final Pokemon, Manectric. This is where I activate my Trap card, as I switch into Argos Day the Gyarados. We get off an Intimidate as Manectric uses Howl, neutralizing his attack stat. Argos Day is the perfect bait for Manectric's Shockwave, so I go to Axpair who resists it. Yep, Gyarados was just a pivot. Manectric paralyzes us with Thunder Wave, but that gets cured with a held Cherry Berry. Then, we successfully connect with a Stun Spore, giving us the high ground. Since we have decent health, I fire off a Bullet Seed for not much damage, but Manectric stays paralyzed. Then, not wanting to put Manectric into Citrus Berry range, I use Leech Life for not much damage, but the Electric Pup stays paralyzed. One more Leech Life, then Manectric finally paralyzes us again with Thunder Wave. Switch over to Quagrise on a full paralysis, Manectric uses Quick Attack, we go for a Mudshot, and the damage roll is enough to take out Manectric. Very happy with the performances of Quagrise and Axpair on this one. That's the third gym badge. With the new Mauville City gym badge, we're able to make our way up to Route 111 and Route 112, where we find a rather familiar face to the Hoenn region, a Torchic. We successfully catch it and name it Baze Link. In the Fiery Path, we find ourselves a pretty interesting encounter in the form of Vibrava, which we named Gulf NY, or Gulf New York. Part of me feels conflicted about this encounter because it's technically not supposed to be a Vibrava until level 35, but since it's still randomized and out of my control, I decided to allow it. Route 113 we find a Diglett that we named Dodie Rug, then we pass through Falarber Town to pick up the Dig TM and find a new encounter on Route 114, Eevee. Not gonna lie, this one is pretty clutch. We name it VE. In Meteor Falls, we witness a fight between Team Aqua and Team Magma over which one has more stylish outfits, and then we meet a new friend in the form of Dark King the Seadra. Now technically I could use Thief to steal a Dragon Scale from a wild Seadra and evolve this into a Kingdra right away, but I decided to wait until when you can normally catch a Horsea in Emerald, which isn't until you get the Super Rod in Moss Deep City, just as a way of not being able to plow through the mid-game with a Kingdra. Baze Link evolves into the most awkward prepubescent tweenager of all time, and then we take on Team Magma on Mount Chimney. We take on the Maxi battle, and Annie Sarah gets in on the action against his mighty Anna. He made a rare AI switch to his Camerupt, so I switched over to Quagrise, who I may or may not have risked a crit for, but we go unpunished. The rest of the battle goes smoothly enough, and then we carry on our way. Climbing down Mount Chimney, we find another fiery-furred friend in the form of Houndour. This, again, has Roar, but thankfully we're able to catch it before it gets the chance to bark. We finally make it to Laveridge Town, and it's here where I get a brilliant new idea, to not calculate or plan for the gym. I calculated and planned for the first 3 gyms, but for this one I wanted to try a little bit of thinking on my feet and acting on instinct, especially after how well the Watson fight went. This will definitely have no repercussions for me at all whatsoever. Before then, I discovered that Nidorina doesn't really get any new moves beyond this point that are worth delaying his evolution for, so I decide to use the Moonstone found in Meteor Falls to give us our new beastly Nidoking. So with that, it's time to see what an unplanned Flannery fight looks like. The first 3/4 of this battle go pretty smoothly, considering that we take out her Numel, her Slugma, and her Camerupt with 1 water gun apiece. However, the real threat on our team is Torkoal. Allow me to throw this back to past Zerna to explain what I was thinking in this exact moment. I'm a little tempted to go for Leer or Smokescreen. Can anyone guess what's wrong with my thought process of using Smokescreen or Leer? Anyone? If not, allow me to show you. Let's throw a Smokescreen down. Yeah, I forgot about White Smoke. This is quite the rookie mistake, because I've literally played this game more times than I've been to the dentist, which isn't information you really needed to know, but now it's just out there. This lets her set up a Sunny Day for free. I then go for Twister, which gets a lucky flinch, but after the second one, Torkoal uses Body Slam. Fearing a potential overheat, I decide to switch to Gulf New York. Torkoal does in fact go for overheat, but it cleanly takes out Gulf New York. I remember thinking to myself, it resists fire type moves, it'll be fine. But it's painfully obvious that I was wrong. I'm so sorry you had to fall because of my own stupidity, Gulf New York. Torkoal is then cured of its special attack drop with a White Herb. At the very least, we get a safe switch to Quagrise and use Mud Shot while Torkoal just goes for Body Slam. I then have the incredible idea of going for Tail Whip. Yeah, it's amazing how you can forget about White Smoke twice, in the same battle. Torkoal does more damage with a Body Slam, and I go for Mud Shot once again to see if we can take it out, but not quite. I take this opportunity to switch over to Aritecta while she heals. My plan from here is pretty simple. Brute Force. Ari chomps the turtle with a Hyper Fang. Then Torkoal uses another Overheat, which takes out Aritecta. Son of a Bibarel. That's a third of my team gone to just one Pokemon. Since the sun is down, I switch over to Dark King to use a Water Gun, which brings Torkoal to about a third. Then she uses Body Slam, but no paralysis or crit. Torkoal falls to one more Water Gun, and that's the end of the battle. Sucks to lose 2 Mons, but a win is a win. In the Route 111 desert, we find a Snubbull named Garbnol. In the Mirage Tower, we're lucky enough to find a Bulbasaur named Runs Uvia. We make sure to grab the fossil in the tower before it all comes crashing down like a 250-year-old empire. Then we head back to Petalburg City where we can use our old rod to fish up a new encounter, and the good luck continues as we find our homeboy Squirtle. Squirtle. We name him Albitos. Also, I backtrack to Fall Arbor Town to get the return TM, and stop in Rustboro City to see what our randomized fossil encounter is. It's a Gulpin. You're never gonna see this thing again. It's time we take on Norman. And this time, I make sure to actually have a plan. You know what's the funny part though? I still found a way to mess this up. See, he leads with his Spinda, and I lead with Garbnol, which has evolved into a Granbull. I forget how slow Granbulls are. So slow that Spinda outspeeds Garbnol to go for a Teeter Dance, which immediately causes us to hit ourselves in confusion. A return from Garbnol has a good chance of taking out Spinda, but somehow I completely overlooked the fact that Spinda would outspeed me. Oh well. I switch to Anisera to shake off the confusion, but Spinda goes for a second Teeter Dance in a row. This definitely throws me off. I know that Gen 1 AI is predictive, but I thought that they fixed that by Gen 3. Weird. I switch to Garbnol, which in retrospect I don't really know why I did that since Garbnol still doesn't outspeed. Doesn't matter much since I get confused on the switch in with Psybeam. Back to Anisera on another Psybeam, thankfully no confusion, then we use Flamethrower to finally deal some damage on this thing, before it confuses us with Teeter Dance. I then send in Dodie Rug on a Psybeam, which of course crits, before I finally take out this atrocious little bear thing with a Dig. Good riddance. Norman sends in Vigoroth, so I switch to Garbnol who gets off an Intimidate drop before dodging a critical hit. A held Oranberry gives us back a bit of HP, then take a bit of damage from Facade before we bring Vigoroth deep into the red with the return. Norman of course heals, so we bring Vigoroth back down into the red before switching over to Ego Yurt, dodging a crit, and taking out Vigoroth with a Mach Punch. For Lanoon, we use Mach Punch to bring it over half, which renders its Belly Drum useless, and then we take it out with another Mach Punch. Finally, then, is his Slacking. There are at least 2 ways of handling Norman's Slacking safely. Dig or Protect. I have Dig on Dignikon, and Protect on Dostux. The only problem is that if Slacking goes for Facade and crits, it'll easily take out either Pokemon. I ultimately decide to send out Dostux first, since I figure Dignikon will be more valuable to us in the late game than Dostux will. Even if Dostux dies, it'll give us a safe switch to Dignikon. So, we send out Dostux and... Slacking wastes a counter. By using Protect on the attacking turns, and Psybeam and Psychic on the loafing turns, we can slowly whittle away at Slacking's health, also using a Lepa Berry to cure the Protect PP. A few turns later, Slacking falls, crushing this gargantuan ape with a mighty little bug. While traveling up north, we find a Lotad on Route 119 and name it Cleo Ludo. Then we stop at the Weather Institute to tell everyone there that Team Magma is spreading rumors about Team Aqua outfits being entirely comprised of clothing from Walmart and JCPenney. By defeating Shelly, we get the randomized Castform encounter, which ends up being a Wailord named Dior Law. Kinda funny to think that it was a teeny tiny little Castform that got randomized into a huge old Wailord. Gotta love it. The rival battle on Route 119 is easily taken care of, and then we find ourselves in Fortree City. I also make the decision to evolve our V into a Jolteon, figuring he'll be pretty useful for this gym and a lot of the endgame. Welcome to the team, buddy. Well, you're already in the team, but you know what I mean. So we take to the skies and face off Winona. Leading with Albitos, who now is a Wartortle, we cleanly take out the Swablu with a critical hit Ice Beam. Next, we swap to Moho Undo the Houndoom as Tropius sets up a Solar Beam. Totally fine. We take it out on the next turn with a Flamethrower. As she brings in Pelipper, I switch to V for obvious reasons, and then after 2 protects, I cleanly take it out with a Thunderbolt. Winona then sends in her ace, Altaria. This fluffy duck threatens with Earthquake, so I switch to Dark King, still a Seadra, as she sets up a Dragon Dance. On the next turn, she just uses Dragon Breath. No paralysis, but we had a Cherry Berry just in case. Then we use Ice Beam to bring Altaria deep into the red before she uses a Hyper Potion. However, Dark King means business because on the next turn, he Ice Beams Altaria for a clean 1-hit KO. King Her last Pokemon is Skarmory, but with a simple switch to Moho Undo, we can easily take it out with a Flamethrower, making us Master of the Skies. Kind of. On our way to Lilycove City, we stop at Mount Pyre to pick up the Shadow Ball TM. Our team handles the Aquagrum battles on Mount Pyre with relative ease, and then we arrive in Lilycove City where we defeat our rival May one last time. We fish up a new encounter in Lilycove City, a Slowpoke that we name Lopeswalk, and then we make our way back to Mount Chimney and enter the Magma Hideout. Overall, the battle against Maxie goes pretty smoothly, using team members like Albitos the Blastoise, V the Jolteon, and Runs Uvia the Venusaur. After receiving the Pokeblock case in Lilycove City, we're able to evolve Cleo-Tim into a majestic Milotic, and on Route 124 we complete the Kanto starter trifecta by finding a Charmander and naming him Hazard Rick. The only other notable encounters before we hit Moss Deep City are a Pelipper we find in Shoal Cave named Peppy Pearl. Down south in Route 128 we find a Mankey named Emma Piper. Route 131 we find a Slackoth named Kath Soul, and then I find an Elekid in what I think is Pacific Town, so I catch it, but it turns out that it was Route 131 instead, where I already caught the Slackoth. So I catch a new encounter in the actual Pacific Town, a Rhyhorn that we named Dryhun. We then release the Elekid into the wild. Oh well. Since Moss Deep City gives us the Super Rod, I grant myself permission to use a little magic to trade evolve Dark King with a Dragon Scale, giving us a Kingdra. We also evolve Hazardrick into a beastly Charizard. The fight against Tate and Liza always makes me pretty nervous, but with my best plan in place, let's see what our team can do. I lead with Milotic and Kingdra, and immediately the Xatu confuses Milotic with Confuse Ray, but that gets cured by a held Lumberry. This paves the way for Cleo-Tim to set up a Rain Dance, and then Dark King unleashes a rain-boosted Surf that deals some pretty decent damage against Claydol and Xatu. Claydol simply retaliates with an Earthquake. Dark King outspeeds on the next turn due to the Swift Swim ability, so he uses Surf to take out the Claydol and bring Xatu into the red. Lunatone gets sent out, and then Xatu sets up a Sunny Day before getting taken out with an Ice Beam from Cleo-Tim. This sets the stage for just Solrock and Lunatone. I'd love to stay in and set up another Rain Dance with Cleo-Tim, but since the sun is out, I'm risking him to a Solar Beam from Solrock. Milotic should outspeed the Solrock, unless Solrock has a plus speed nature. If Solrock outspeeds, Cleo-Tim could potentially die to a Solar Beam, so I make the decision to do a double switch, into Hazard Rick and Moho Undo. The Houndoom switch pays off immediately, as Solrock actually went for Psychic into the Dark King slot, rendering it useless. Lunatone, however, sets up a Calm Mind, so it becomes my immediate target. I double up into the Lunatone with first a Shadow Ball from Moho Undo, and then a Steel Wing from Hazard Rick, which puts Lunatone into the red. Tate and Liza then double up into Hazard Rick with Psychics, which puts him in the red. Close call there, but glad we dodged a crit. I weigh my options here, but since both Solrock and Lunatone see kills into Hazard Rick, I stay in and use Protect. Moho Undo then fires off a Shadow Ball and takes out Lunatone, making this a 2v1. My prediction was correct as Solrock goes for Psychic into Hazard Rick. On the next turn, I switch Hazard Rick into Quagrise as Moho Undo brings Solrock to half with a Shadow Ball. Solrock uses Psychic on Quagrise for about a third. It seems like the Shadow Ball did barely not enough damage to activate Solrock's held Citrus Berry. I then Protect with Quagrise and go for Shadow Ball with Moho Undo, which just barely misses out on the KO. Solrock actually goes for Solar Beam despite no Sunny Day, and then heals up a bit of HP with a Citrus Berry. I'm then rather overly cautious and decide to switch Quagrise over to Dig Nikon, but it doesn't really matter much because Moho Undo fires off one last Shadow Ball into Solrock, ending the battle and defeating Tate and Liza deathless. We're now in the endgame of this challenge, and our greatest threats are still ahead of us. Before then, we have a few new encounters. I completely forgot about the Safari Zone encounter, so I go back there and find a Bayleaf that we catch and nickname Genia Mum. Route 132, we find a Duskull, our only ghost type, that we catch and name LCD Soups. We then take care of the Moss Deep Space Center tag battle with Steven, get the Dive gem from him, and then eventually find our way to Satopolis City. I use the Super Rod here to get a potentially more exciting encounter, and it's a freaking Scizor, baby! It actually managed to set up 2 sword dances in a row, and fearing the possibility of losing one of my team members and not wanting to run away, I decided to throw my Master Ball at him. Call me a coward, but at least I'm a coward with a Scizor. Not quite the flex I was hoping it to be. We name him Chris Oz. Oh, and he's adamant, so that's pretty sick. Chris Oz is pretty immediately put to use as I lead with him against Archie in Seafloor Cavern. After a swagger boost, and the confusion getting cured by a Persimberry, we take out the Mightyena with a Metal Claw. Crobat and Sharpedo are then easily taken care of by a couple of Thunderbolts from V. Groudon and Kyogre then engage in discourse over whether Team Aqua or Team Magma have the superior sense of fashion, so we make our way to Sky Pillar to ask Rayquaza to settle the score on this controversial debate once and for all. While there, coincidentally our encounter ends up being an Elekid, so it looks like Akbuzz Lee will get to be a part of the team after all. Rayquaza then shows up, says that neither team is fashionable, and that Rayquaza themselves are the true fashion icon of Hoenn. With that out of the way, it's time we take on our final gym challenge, Juan. His left disc is easily taken out by a Thunderbolt from V, but then in comes Whiscash. I bring in Genia Mum as Whiscash sets up a Rain Dance. Seeing as to how Juan's Swift Swim Kingdra is a bigger threat to me than Whiscash, I take a turn to protect and stall out a turn of Rain, while Whiscash uses Amnesia. A non-critical hit Razor Leaf won't be enough to take out Whiscash due to the Amnesia. But of course we crit anyway. Right on. Juan goes for Celio anyway due to it having Aurora Beam. I use Protect to block the Aurora Beam and stall a turn of Rain, then I switch to Lope's Walk the Slowbro on a follow-up Aurora Beam. Rain stops, then we use Yawn and Protect to put Celio to sleep before we switch over to V and take it out with Thunderbolt. Crawdaunt comes out and dies to a Thunderbolt, and then lastly is Kingdra. I use Thunder Wave to paralyze the Kingdra, and Kingdra goes for the dreaded double team. On the next turn, I thankfully connect with a Thunderbolt as it brings the Steroid Seahorse to just over half. V has the chance to clutch up this victory in one final Thunderbolt, before the Kingdra uses more double teams or rest. Can V bring us home? Yes, he can. Thunderbolt connects and finishes off Juan's ace, giving us our final gym badge in this half-randomized hardcore Nuzlocke. It feels great to have made it this far on the first attempt, but the Elite Four is a completely different story from the rest of the game. Before taking them on, we get access to 2 last randomized encounters, in the form of a Ladian in Evergrande City and a Swinub in Victory Road. We have the Wally fight in Victory Road, but with some planning and careful switching, we make it out unscathed. So after trekking through the rest of Victory Road, we arrive at the threshold of our final challenge. Even though we've had many different kinds of encounters in this run, it took me several hours to come up with the best team for this gauntlet. A lot of that has to do with not using any setup moves or EV training, but still, lots of preparation went into this, and I still don't have perfect answers into everything. So after lots of calculating, team building, and crying, I've assembled the final crew. Emma Piper the Primeape, who I haven't used up until this point, but she fits very well into this Elite Four. Fast, furious, and ready to rumble. V the Jolteon, which should come as no surprise. He's been a pivotal member of our team for a while now, and he certainly is the speediest Thunderbolt user of our box. Dark King the Kingdra, who again should come as no surprise. The incredible offenses and speed make him a powerful member of our team. Cleoludo the Ludicolo, who has great typing and is always the life of the party. Lope's Walk the Slowbro, who has solid damage output and works very well as a support Pokemon. Then lastly, we have LCD Soups the Dusclops, which I wasn't expecting at first, but you'll see soon enough how she comes into play. Let's see if this team has what it takes to finish off this half-randomized hardcore Nuzlocke, or die trying. First up in the Elite Four is Sydney. He leads with Mightyena, and I lead with Emma Piper. Mightyena gets off an Intimidate, but we cure that with a held White Herb. From there, Emma Piper sweeps his entire team with Brick Breaks and Low Kicks. That is by far the easiest part of this Elite Four challenge. Phoebe is up next with their Ghost types, and it feels weird to not be including a Dark type on my team, but I have my own strategy in place for her. Her Dusclops loves to go for Protect on the first turn, so I take that as an opportunity to set up a Rain Dance. On the next turn, I use a Rain Boosted Surf to bring Dusclops low before she curses us, taking itself down. She sends in one of her bayonets, and wanting to shake off the curse, I switch over to Cleoludo as she just goes for a grudge. I utilize the rain to go for a surf, which brings the phantasmic puppet deep into the red before she whiffs a will-o-wisp. Phoebe heals, and on the same turn I take the bayonet out with a critical hit surf. Sableye comes out, and the rain has stopped. But I go for surf anyway, which brings the gremlin ghoul to over half before she uses double team. Thankfully, a second surf on the next turn takes her out. The second bayonet comes out, and I go for surf, which brings bayonet low before she retaliates with a shadow ball. She heals, and I take this as an opportunity to use Giga Drain and gain back some HP. A second Giga Drain looks like it's a roll to kill, but I decide to go for it anyway, and we cinch the KO, bringing Cleoludo to full health. This leaves us with her ace Dusclops, and after a few exchanges with Surfs, a Giga Drain, and Shadow Balls, the Dusclops eventually falls, winning us the battle. Next up is Glacia and her ice types. Her leading Celio is easily taken care of by a Thunderbolt from V. Classic V. She then sends in one of her Glalie. One of them has Explosion, although we don't know which one this is yet. Our safest switch is to go into LCD Soups the Dusclops. Glalie uses Icy Wind, revealing that she's the Glalie that doesn't have Explosion. This also means we're now baiting Crunch, which gives me a safe switch into Emma Piper as she comes in on the aforementioned move. From there, Emma Piper outspeeds and kills with a low kick. Next up is her second Celio, and this one could take out Emma Piper with a critical hit Blizzard, so I switch to Cleoludo. Celio just sets up a Hail regardless. Giga Drain on the next turn does over half. Blizzard plus Hail Chip does decent damage, and then we take out the Celio with a second Giga Drain. Her penultimate Pokemon is her second Glalie, which we know has Explosion. Here, we utilize the same strategy as with the first Glalie by switching to LCD Soups. She comes in on an Ice Beam that freezes. It's a good thing that this doesn't matter at all. Hail Chip brings our Ghoulie Gal over half before she recovers some of her own HP with a Citrus Berry. This now absolutely baits Shadow Ball, which gives us a relatively safe switch to Emma Piper. Emma Piper then takes her second KO of the match. Last up is Walrein, and here we switch into Lope's Walk. He comes in on an Ice Beam and tanks it like a bro. We had a held Lumberry in case the Ice Beam froze him. Walrein then goes for Surf for a bit more damage before I use Yawn. Lope's Walk can't die to a critical hit Surf or Ice Beam, so I tank the hit before using Psychic to get some damage off on the Walrein. From there, it's a simple switch to V to outspeed and kill with a Thunderbolt. Drake is the final Elite Four member, and this is where bad RNG could really screw me over. But let's find out. Against his leading Shelgon, I set up a Rain Dance. Not because of the boost in my Water-type moves, but because now I definitively outspeed his entire team, even after a speed drop from Shelgon's Rock Tomb. A Never Melt Ice boosted Ice Beam takes it out in one hit. His following Flygon and Altaria each fall to Ice Beams, and here I prepare for the idea of Kingdra coming out, but it's actually Salamence. This works out perfectly, because I take this last turn of rain to outspeed and kill with an Ice Beam, eliminating most of his team. Last up is his Kingdra, and for this I switch over to Lope's Walk as he sets up a Dragon Dance. Kingdra sets up a second Dragon Dance, definitely a little scary, and I use Yawn to start the process of putting him to sleep. Kingdra uses Body Slam for about a third, which causes a paralysis, but we had a held Lumberry for this exact reason, so we get off some damage with a Psychic. A second Psychic brings Kingdra into the red, which means Drake goes for a full restore, and in that same turn, I use Yawn to start putting him to sleep again. Kingdra goes for a third Dragon Dance, fun, and I use Psychic for barely half health. A second Psychic again brings Kingdra into the red, which means it's another full restore heal and another Yawn. This time I go for Protect, which thankfully he only went for Body Slam instead of Dragon Dance. Psychic brings Kingdra to half, and on the next turn Kingdra wakes up and uses a fourth Dragon Dance. Our following Psychic comes out, and it leaves Kingdra in the red. A +4 attack, +4 speed Kingdra isn't the best thing to be facing, but thankfully I have one good solution. LCD Soups, who can't take any damage from Body Slam. Drake interestingly just goes for Smokescreen, but thankfully that doesn't even matter, because on the next turn, he uses Surf before I retaliate with a Shadow Punch, which never misses, therefore finishing off Kingdra and defeating the last Elite Four member. Which means it's time for our ultimate showdown against Champion Wallace. This is the last fight of the run, which means that if I have to sacrifice a Pokemon or 2, or 5, to guarantee the victory, I'll do so. One way or another, this all ends here. Wallace leads with Wailord, and we lead with a familiar face, V. A mighty Thunderbolt zaps the Whale Behemoth out of existence. He then goes to Gyarados, which is due to a funny Gen 3 AI quirk where it likes to send out a Pokemon with a super effective move, in this case Earthquake, but is also weak to your Pokemon. So, we take advantage of that and bring down the Gyarados in the most classic way possible, with any damaging electric type move ever. Next is Whiscash, makes a little more sense, and we switch over to Cleoludo on a resisted Earthquake, despite it being a crit. We use Giga Drain on the next turn, which leaves Whiscash on a sliver of health before he uses Amnesia. This actually isn't the worst thing, because it forces Wallace to use one of his full restores. 2 Giga Drains later, and Whiscash is brought to a sliver of health again, and then Whiscash unleashes a Hyper Beam, bringing Cleoludo to 99 HP. I weigh my options here, but ultimately decide to take it out with another Giga Drain while Whiscash has to recharge. Wallace then brings out Tentacruel, and we're now baiting a Sludge Bomb, so I switch over to Lopeswalk, who takes the hit relatively well. On the next turn, he goes for Hydro Pump, which actually does more damage than Sludge Bomb despite it being resisted, and then we go for the classic Yawn. Protect, and then we use Psychic to bring Tentacruel over half. Tentacruel stays asleep on the next turn, which means we can take the KO with a second Psychic. Next up, though, is one of the greatest threats on his team, Ludicolo, mostly because of Double Team. He goes for that very move, but I use Yawn, which never misses. Protect on the next turn, which thankfully he went for Giga Drain, therefore wasting one of the 5 Giga Drain PP. While he's asleep, I try to go for Psychic, which misses, although on the second turn thankfully the Ludicolo stays asleep while I go for a Psychic that connects, bringing him down to about 2/3. Ludicolo could very well wake up this turn, and I look to my team to decide which one to bring in next. Although, while trying to look at V's info, I accidentally just switch him in instead. Thankfully the Ludicolo just stays asleep. Since I'm in with V, I try to just go for Thunderbolt, which of course misses, and then Ludicolo goes for Leech Seed. To shake off the Leech Seed, I switch over to Dark King while Ludicolo sets up another Double Team. It's a risky move, but I decide to go for Toxic, which very thankfully connects, putting Ludicolo on the clock. Ludicolo goes for his second Giga Drain, but the HP recovery will be offset by Toxic damage. I use Protect to rack up more Toxic damage while Ludicolo goes for yet another Double Team. I then go for Return, which misses, and Ludicolo uses a third Giga Drain. Dark King then connects with the Return, but after Giga Drain number 4 and Toxic damage, Ludicolo is in the range for a heal. I take this opportunity to switch over to LCD Soups, who has the Shadow Punch move that never misses. Ludicolo goes for Double Team while I use Shadow Punch. Then Ludicolo uses Surf while a second Shadow Punch brings Ludicolo to about half. On the next turn, a Surf brings LCD Soups to 41 HP, and we use Shadow Punch to bring Ludicolo to just above 25%, therefore avoiding a heal. LCD Soups can't outspeed Ludicolo or Milotic, so while it sucks, I know what I have to do. LCD Soups ended up being pivotal for this Elite Four, but now it's time for her to make a worthy sacrifice. I click Shadow Punch, but she gets taken down by one last Surf. Rest in peace, LCD Soups. I then bring in Dark King, and then I use Protect to thankfully stall Ludicolo out of his final Giga Drain PP, although it doesn't matter too much, because on the next turn I use Return to finish off Ludicolo once and for all. Good riddance. Last up then is Milotic. I use Protect, which blocks a Toxic, then Milotic brings us low with Ice Beam before we retaliate with a Return for some decent damage. Then, just like with LCD Soups, I know what has to be done. If anything, Dark King will go out in a blaze of glory. I go for one more Return, but Milotic outspeeds and uses Ice Beam, which doesn't kill, but does get the freeze. This doesn't really change much of anything, so we watch as our beautiful boy goes down to one more Ice Beam. I switch to Lopeswalk, and Milotic misses a Toxic while I land a Yawn. Milotic then uses Surf to bring Lopeswalk to 57 HP while I use a Psychic, which brings Milotic to just over half, therefore using up his Citrus Berry. I need a little more damage on this Milotic, so while he stays asleep, I go for Psychic and pray that we don't crit, which thankfully we don't. I want to bring in V safely, which means either Lopeswalk has to go down, or I need to make sure the Milotic is guaranteed to be asleep. So I use Protect, which blocks a Surf, then on the next turn, Milotic goes for another Surf, which brings Lopeswalk to 15 HP, therefore landing a Yawn. I use Protect, and then the final moment is imminent. Switch into V, who has been there with us for so much of this journey, as Milotic will now enter what will be an eternal sleep. V takes one final Thunderbolt KO, therefore handing us the victory and making us champions of the Hoenn Pokemon League. That was a ton of fun. I'm really happy I got to play this familiar game with some brand new encounters, and admittedly some familiar ones. But overall, I really enjoyed not knowing what to expect on every new route, while still having to think about my strategies for opponents. I would consider doing this again in another game, but I've got a few other ideas in mind for now. I'm interested in doing more out-of-the-box challenges, ones that are unique and not done very often, not necessarily just monotype Nuzlocks. Let me know if you have any ideas. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and if you haven't done so already, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Alright, it's time to U-turn out of here. Peace.